go. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Do we have any public comment? Anything from you guys? The only two possibilities? You're our public.
I just have a question about something, but it doesn't pertain to minutes. I don't know if I should.
Oh, no.
No, this is your moment.
Yes.
This is my moment?
This is it.
Okay. I have heard that there's going to be a pickup station behind the sand pit with Bill Drunzik's pellets. How is that working?
There's a lease agreement, that the town's gonna work out with him.
And nothing's been asked about the neighbors. I personally don't wanna look across the road and see a train stopped and
Sure.
a truck.
Sure, so, the siding is, we can't control, you know, their ability to use the space in the right of way. And essentially, he's gonna drive around the sand pile like the trucks drive around the sand pile. And there's gonna be a rail, you know, rail siding with, I think, 2 or 3 cars there to pick up the pellets.
And how
So
long
no
do those cars,
structures,
how long
no-
do those cars stay there?
I don't know, you know, it's gonna be during the winter when they do the offloading.
So you don't know if they're just gonna offload and then they leave?
No, the cars will, it's a separate siding, so there's 2 railroad, there's the main
Right.
railroad, then a siding. The
Yeah.
cars are gonna be pushed up here, they'll offload from the cars to the truck and go. So there's no structure that's built, there's nothing like that.
Oh, I'm not worried about a structure, I just don't wanna look at,
It's behind the sand pile.
railroad, I can see behind the sand pile.
Okay.
I don't wanna see rail cars parked there for an
On the
extended period
railroad
of time.
rails.
Yeah,
Right
they
now-
never have been before,
Yeah, no, it's in a storage area, there's been creosote, railroad ties stored there and
Exactly.
railroad equipment and everything.
but when I bought the property, there were no cars parked there.
It doesn't mean that they can't be there. It's within their right of way to do stuff like that.
So basically what you're saying is, it's a moot point, I mean,
What are you asking for? What are you trying to
well, I would
affect or
prefer
change
not to
or-
have that done in that area, because if cars are gonna be parked there,
Mhm.
I don't wanna see 3 rail cars parked there, so when I look out my front window, I mean, I understand, when I bought the property, yes, I live across from the town shed,
Sure,
that I get, fine, but I don't wanna look at rail cars,
okay.
that's my concern. And I haven't heard anything, maybe I'm missing something, but I haven't heard anything or seen anything posted that this was coming along.
It's not a regulatable, I can pull up the info from the attorney, but it's not, we can't regulate the use.
They don't need a town permit for any
Nope.
of this.
For none of it. They need our permission to drive around the stone pile.
Because it's the railroad, is the railroad?
No,
No,
so,
that's Bill
so,
Drunzik.
so the,
No, but
Vermont
it was-
Renewable Fuels will work out a lease agreement with them where basically they'll be able to drive around the stone pile, offload into the,
But it-
container truck.
I was
in
just
the
thinking-
driveway.
But the rail cars belong to who?
The rail cars belong to the vendor that
No,
ships them.
just thinking that the rail belongs to Vermont, the
V-Trans.
rail system,
State of Vermont,
right?
yeah.
So they're the guys that actually have the say, the control
Over the use and what it looks
Use.
like and all that stuff, yeah.
So
We can't.
did he
regulate.
have to cut a deal with them to?
Correct, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to allow them
To do the improvements, and he's gotta lease the space from them. But we can't control what goes on
On the
Right.
rail?
on the other side of that line, we can't control what goes on.
On the rail, but you can control his truck going into the town
Yep.
shed area.
Yep.
And is the town getting compensated for that?
We haven't, the lease agreement isn't finalized yet, so. There'll be some effort, maybe it could be screening for a neighbor. You know, I'm not sure what, you know, I don't have comps, and, you know, once we get those, pass it by the attorney and go from there.
Well, I just think it would be a nice courtesy for the town, if it's something,
He
it sounds like
wanted-
we have nothing to say about it or any control over it, but if the town is
Sure.
being compensated for his truck to pull over there, I just don't think it's right.
So the railroad trucks they pull through there and utilize it all the time, and we don't get compensated for that.
But they're also not parked there.
No,
Right.
they can be parked there for, yeah, they're parked,
But a truck and a rail car are completely different. I'm thinking about a rail car, do you wanna look out, well, I'm sure if you lived, do you wanna look out your front window and see a rail car?
I'm not gonna answer that because I don't live there, but if you looked out, you would have seen railroad ties and the picking equipment and everything
And the
else.
ties are, that has nothing to do with it, I'm talking about a rail car.
I don't know
actual
that I would
rail
differentiate the difference between the stone pile, the railroad and everything else. I mean, I think it's a commercial use. So, I mean, I get what you're saying, we could talk about screening if that helps.
Well, and what my concern is, looking out the window and seeing rail cars parked there. Now, is it, the train's gonna come in, they're gonna offload and pick up the pellets and be on their way? Is it that type of situation? Or are we gonna have rail cars on that railroad
I
parked?
mean, it's a railroad. That's where, I'm not trying, I mean, I think
No,
it's.
you're
I think
missing the point,
I'm not
is
missing
I'm
the point. I think the
asking,
expectation that you're not gonna allow or regulate rail cars in the railroad right away is that we're not
and
gonna do that.
I'm asking
We can't do that.
what the situation is going to be. Is it they are going to be parked there?
Yes, until they're emptied and then they'll
And is that gonna
return full.
involve several days? Is that gonna be just,
I
you know,
don't,
they're gonna,
I don't know, and I can try to get the information for you.
that would be good.
If that's
And
what you're asking.
I think the neighbors
Mhm.
should be made aware of that as just a courtesy. We may not have any control over it. The town has obviously got control over who can go in that area if you're on the town land. So it would be nice to know what's coming along, because I don't think anybody wants to look across and see these rail cars.
Yeah, I mean,
lined
I
up.
think this is just it's a chance to get a bite at the apple, right? I mean, I think it's, you guys live across from the commercial space and it's tough, so, I mean, we can talk about screening, you know, we can't regulate, I could potentially get the information, but that,
I'd
you know, that
appreciate
doesn't
the
allow us to
information,
regulate it.
yes. And I think some of the other neighbors, they were unaware of this, of what was happening.
It's not something where they're required to be notified.
No, it's just a courtesy.
He wanted to do it on the fire department facility, directly across, you know, on the other yard on the other side of the brook,
By the parking lot.
yeah. So
He
we,
wanted to do it there.
correct, yeah, which would have been, it didn't work, it would have
Oh,
basically
then you're gonna have a lot more neighbors jump.
it would have taken away the ability to use that yard, so.
Okay, alright. That's my only question.
Okay. Alright, so we have bylaw update.
Where's the first? I wrote her information. All questions that could have been asked during the day. Bylaw update. So I don't think I have any, so the update is real brief. The PC had their hearing for they're gonna have it in November, so it's warned, they're gonna have it in November, relative to the map change. So the Danby Mountain Road area, the rural resource protection space, the line has been moved up to a higher elevation to accommodate the pre-existing building lots in that area. There's like 7 of them. And that's.
And just in that one section.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the map that'll get, you know, that's the amendment to the map, I guess. That'll be put to public hearing in November.
Okay. And was that run by, I think it was Ann Thompson who raised it,
Yes,
and she said that looked like it covered the right spot, okay,
yes, yep.
okay, good.
So then if that, you know, if they approve it in November, it'll get to the board in December.
Okay.
Do we need to warn that specifically?
Yes, yep. So once they approve it in November, then we would, publish and create and publish the warning for the December meeting.
Okay.
Okay. Nonprofit appropriation policy discussion.
Just brief, I just wanted to bring it up that there was a lot of discussion at the last meeting, about floor votes, Australian ballot, all that other stuff. No real decisions to change anything there, but there was a couple of times a discussion about the potential for requiring petitions and not grandfathering certain organizations, you know, above a certain dollar amount. And I'm just kind of giving the reminder or the space to talk about that.
All right, so if we're going to do that, which is asking people to petition again, then we wanna give them some time and notice that they have to do that, because they would have to get that done. It's done by like January, right?
January 18th this year.
Yeah,
That's when they have to have it in by?
yeah, so we would wanna notify them that they would have to have a petition, and I know we've talked about, I know at the last meeting, I couldn't really hear what everybody was saying, but I know we've talked about like maybe over $2,000 asking the entities to just put out a petition, so why don't you guys tell me what exactly was said at the last meeting, and if that's something that we wanna do, because if so, then we should vote on that maybe tonight, so that people can.
Can I add something that I've been getting a lot of calls and people are gonna increase their appropriation request this year. And I've told them to hold off until I find out if they need to. They have to do a petition if they're gonna increase it anyways, but I wanted to tell them if it was gonna be required regardless,
Okay.
so.
So what do we all think about that, or was there a dollar number, cause I know in the past we
We're
talked about
talking
2,000,
2,500.
2,500.
Right.
2,000, 2,500 seems like a good number to me.
Yeah, because there's a
Agreed.
lot that are lower than
Right,
that,
the
and those are,
500s,
you know,
the
and those are the
750s.
people that are going out to like 6 different towns, and it's just a lot of work, and it's not a lot of money to support those entities, but I think once you're getting up to the big dollar figures.
And are we gonna ask them to do that every year? If it's, let's say, over that 2,500,
I mean,
I can't remember what we've talked
you know,
That was
I-
kind of
That
the
was the
discussion, is
idea.
right now,
Yeah.
if they do it successfully at the same number for 3 years in a row, that
Then
they
we
get
don't ask for it,
grandfathered,
yeah.
and then they no longer have to do the petition. And then there's kind of a feeling that you know, when you start to get into the tens of thousands and it gets grandfathered, that it's not
Right.
getting, you know, maybe the review that
Yeah.
it should get. Or the people just generally aren't aware of it, whereas if they have to stand at Williams and, you know, get people to sign a petition, you know, once a year, it's more likely that, you know, people are gonna be
Aware of it.
aware of it.
And can I add
And that's in the state statute, that's the requirement. So
Every year.
we were being more lenient than.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna add, that's just our policy that we came up with that
The
policy ourselves.
grandfather.
But it's the state requires that you get petitions every year,
regardless of the amount.
regardless of dollar amount.
But giving, usually when the state does something like that, they don't let towns be more lenient than the state.
Right.
They're letting us give them a pass on that.
Well,
I'm
Well, they
not
just
surprised.
don't, nobody knows.
That might be it, hey, just curious.
It's town funds, and local organizations, so.
Yeah.
But whenever the state say, cause you know, our formal law is towns can only do what they're allowed by the state, right? So,
In theory, yeah.
just,
We just did it as a courtesy to the nonprofits, so they wouldn't have to go out and
which
look at
I'm
volunteers.
fine with, I'm just thinking that it's sort of, you know, whether it's totally kosher or not could be a question, but.
well, we've been doing it successfully for some
Right.
years, so I would,
I'm not worried about it.
I would be in favor of, you know, not, for the small amounts again,
Yeah.
I think that makes sense, cause they're just understaffed, these
Mhm.
volunteers,
The people to
and they
go,
go
yeah.
out to like 6 different towns.
together.
But again, I think I think one of the reasons why we're talking about this is because all of a sudden we have a number of entities that are requesting quite a large amount of
Mhm.
money.
Right.
And it just seems like those entities should,
Mhm.
so,
So I'm happy to, at least for the one piece, make a motion that, you know, any appropriate or any request for an amount in excess of $2,000 will be required to annually provide a petition.
okay, do we have a second?
A petition of 50
Yeah.
names, 25 names?
No.
No, it's required by the
It's-
state.
that's-
The number
Okay,
is
perfect.
Five
based on.
percent of the vote registered
Gotcha,
voters.
okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Mm-hmm,
Okay, any further discussion? Okay,
that's good.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay.
I think, you know, another thing that was discussed, whether or not to move everything to Australian ballot.
Right.
Right.
I think that was a much tougher item to push. I don't know whether it makes sense to sort of acknowledge that, at least, you know, maybe just straw poll or whatever. I don't think that taking everything to Australian ballot is gonna be a positive move
Yep.
for town. I don't think I'd support that.
I mean, I think that, you know, well, like some of the things that Sheila Childs was mentioning is, you know, people are intimidated in town meeting to stand up. But on the other hand, if you put it on Australian ballot, everyone assumes it's pre-vetted and you don't have
Right.
any options, so it's just yes or no, so everybody checks the box. At least when it's on a
Or-
floor vote, somebody could make a motion to amend the amount and to
Right.
lower it.
Mhm.
You could do that on the floor.
And it's also, if everybody got up in arms, a bunch of people got up in arms, they could vote one down,
Mhm.
but we wouldn't really necessarily know why, you know, it wouldn't be openly discussed, you
Mhm.
know. It's good to have that.
Well, that's why the petition process is also good, because it's another opportunity for the people applying for the money to do some outreach to members of the community and let them know what it's all about.
And to be able to say, we gathered all these signatures in support, so.
Right. Sandy, what were you gonna say?
Well, I was gonna say that years ago, when we went to one of the reasons they went to Australian ballot for the budget questions was because they thought that the school budgets would get voted down, and we've never voted anything down here.
Right.
As long as I've been here, we've never voted.
No, because
No.
people just don't think about it. They look and they just go, yes, 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 yes.
Yeah.
Oh, the select board has done a good job. They've already figured this all out. It's all been
Although,
pre-vetted.
being on the school board, I've definitely got people who told me that, I don't care what you put in your school budget, I'm not gonna vote for it.
There's more people that do.
There are more people that do, which is nice.
So I think that, based on these conversations, we are just of a consensus, we're just gonna leave it as is with floor votes. And then we'll do the petition and see if that, hopefully that will generate some discussion for the larger appropriations. I know we were also discussing, you know, maybe asking someone to come in, particularly from the nursing organization, ahead of time.
It's my job I was gonna set up a meeting for Henry and I to talk to him, because that amount is out of whack with certain other towns, so.
Exactly.
So Henry and I, you know, I've dealt with those people before. I said I'd be happy to just arrange, that's been on my to-do list for several months, and I haven't done it yet, but I will.
Yeah, cause I thought otherwise if we wait too long, then the petitions are gonna come in, it's gonna be the same amount.
Yep.
So just if there are things that we're feeling like, you know, we wanna give some warning in case it's an issue, we should at least give them a heads up.
But right now, it's just, the real glaring thing is that from town to town, their amounts are, I think there's, you know, history to when it was Dorset Nursing Association, we had a higher amount.
Mm-hmm.
And now that it's part of a larger organization, we still have a higher amount than other people.
Okay, anything else in this conversation? Sandy, did you have any other thoughts?
No, I look forward to getting the petitions, because I think, like you said, too many people just don't know what they're voting for, and they just go
Right.
and vote yes.
I think as far as the materials people provide, I think you know, we've talked about, we don't wanna put too much of a burden on our, you know, town office, but at the same time, you know, trying to make sure that people understand very clearly what information we're asking for them to provide. If they don't provide it, you know, it could even be that we could put in the town report that we requested and, you know, they did not provide everything, you know, we could note it, but that's getting a little, maybe a little picky, or.
Yeah, it might be more work than it's worth.
But I think, cause I think, you know, Rob and company have done a good job of getting people to,
At least submit information.
yeah, and pretty good information, usually, you know.
Mhm.
Okay, anything else? All right, moving on. Housing task force, Liz, did you wanna cover that?
Yes, I would like to. I wanted to update you guys and let you know that in terms of the housing task force study committee that we are putting together, Henry, Rob, and I have met weekly for the past month, and we have been vetting and interviewing potential people to be members of a 9-person committee. And those 9 names are, we have a great group of people in play, but we don't have 9 confirmed names at this time, and so we'll hold off on sharing those names with you. But we've got a great group of a variety of residents, different ages, interesting related professions, etc. We have also determined the length of service for this study committee. We'd like to start with a 3-month study committee. We will have monthly meetings to kind of determine what the scope of the committee will be. It will give an opportunity for people on the committee to feel out the work, get the group to gel, give an exit strategy for folks that might just wanna kind of beam in for 3 months and help out and all the rest. We've also been talking about the meeting format and the agenda setup that we would like, and what we'd like to do is include a monthly review of some of the existing resources that we have at our disposal. We have the NEDS, the North Shire Economic Development Strategy document, which I think was authored in 2016, so it's dated, but it's good information, so it's a very good framing of some stuff. There was the Discover Dorset report that came out of the Vermont Council for Rural Development effort, that was in 2018-19, and one of those projects was the Diverse Housing and Attracting New Residents task force that I actually led, and so there was a lot of good information in that. And we also have a new housing study that BCR, the Planning Commission has been working on. And Rob, do we know if, I mean, there are some final edits being made to
Yeah.
it, but we'll probably see it by the end of the year.
Hope, yeah, if not before.
Hopefully, yeah. And-
What exactly is the planning commission doing with it right now?
Well, didn't
Oh,
we
it was
ask
mostly
them to,
Cause we saw a draft come in.
we saw the draft and we went over the draft, and then I think as a select board, we decided that we wanted to see some information about second homeowners. Remember, cause that data
Yeah,
was
there
left
some
out of it.
Nuances
And there were a
data.
few other things that weren't glaring omissions, but that were things that we thought would kind of bring it a little bit more
Mhm.
into line. But that will be a very good scan, 2022, 2023.
Trying to remember, did that get into the whole, the short-term rental issue at all? Not, I don't think it
It
did.
didn't as much as it looked at demographics, it looked at median
I
incomes.
thought it was really
looked at-
good.
It broached it a
Learned a
little
lot.
bit, but not in any depth. I think it just gave an example of, oh, hey, at this time, there's X amount of short-term rentals in Dorset. But
Like
didn't
just
really-
since we're gonna be looking at, that's on our agenda to do, that, anything useful that they could provide is.
Yeah, Manchester just completed an STR
Mhm.
study, so.
Yep.
I assume there's a lot of comparables between that and us.
Yeah, and I think they said their focus was gonna be first on just trying to get people to register so that they can sort of see what the scope of the situation is, which I think is kind of important because it's hard to know whether the data you have is accurate or not.
Right.
Has the BCRC involvement, are they happy to continue to be involved in the housing? You had mentioned
Well, we were
earlier.
gonna ask Jonathan Cooper
Yeah.
to maybe not be on the committee, but to, at one of these meetings, be the kind of featured speaker.
Okay.
Yeah,
Because
he was around
he's
for
got his
both
hands
the-
in it.
Yeah, for both the housing study and the NEDS
Mm-hmm.
study, so.
Yeah, and so I think that, you know, what we've also talked about are kind of the overall objectives of this 3-month study committee being obviously to do an updated look into the demographics that we're seeing in Dorset, to look at employer partnerships, who we can talk to really get a sense of where the pinch points are from their point of view, to look into some different development scenarios and options, private-public partnerships, private developments, state assisted, what kind of company we would like to work with to start working towards putting some proposals together. And I think exploring sites, both in Dorset and in East Dorset, and in general, just figuring out what the proper mechanisms are gonna be for this group to start to try to unlock some new housing, some potential for moving that forward. So we are meeting on Friday morning, and we are motivated to get this going, and so I think that are there any questions that anybody has, or any thoughts that anybody has?
I think it's great. It'd be interesting as, you know, if you start out with 3 months, it'd be kind of nice to, yeah, just have the periodic check-in at the select board level, just to kind of, you know, okay, what's up, and kind of kick
To
around
report
and see what
each
the
month,
next-
yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think that one of the things we wanted to do tonight, since we haven't yet, would be to bring forth a motion to form this ad hoc committee.
Okay, does someone want?
So if someone
Is
would
it
like to.
9, no, it's 9 persons? or-
9 people, including
people.
2 select board people, and that would be Henry and myself.
Okay, so Liz, why don't you make that motion?
Okay, so I would like to make a motion to form an ad hoc housing study committee that will commence their work in November of 2023 and cease in January with an option to renew.
Not one of those sneaky
Okay.
monthly renewals if you don't opt out.
Exactly.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second?
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay. Great. Okay, Rob, old business?
Okay, on the Newtown office front, I had a design meeting with McClay a couple weeks ago. They met with Naylor and Breen, who's gonna prepare another updated cost estimate in November. And that'll again give us a benchmark kind of where we are in relation to the market, which should be good, hopefully. And then it'll set the stage.
Do we have any expectations on that? You know, kind of as last time, inflation's down from that.
Yeah, no,
Right.
I don't,
But inflation's still there.
other than hoping that it stays within the realm of what's possible. I don't have reason to believe that it won't yet, but we'll see. Some stuff has come down materials wise, some stuff has not. But I think that there's ways to kind of work around some of the aspects of certain parts of that. So I think that from McClay's perspective, that's the next logical step to take, and then that will set the stage for bidding and actually kind of locking in bids, and then getting a contract with Naylor and Breen to guaranteed maximum price of X to build, and then it becomes real.
So that the second sentence in that
Mhm.
section, is that old? It's not starting from today, I guess. Because the permitting's been done and the design's been done.
We still are
waiting for
needing
something?
water, wastewater, and stormwater.
But the idea of the bidding wouldn't be for engineering services, it would
No,
be for
no, that would
construction
be for the
services.
construction services, correct, yeah. Yeah, it would be the, you know, the packages from, framing to electrical to all that stuff. So hopefully, I don't know if we'll get it by the November meeting, maybe the December meeting, I'll have some feedback about the updated pricing. And that'll give us a better sense of where we are.
What's the kind of site work that we can do this winter?
To remove trees, you know, and, you know, some minor excavation. There's a lot of ledge there, so I don't think the excavation's gonna be terribly complex. It might be more, there might be some blasting and some, cutting and filling and stuff, which would be out of the scope of what we could do. But some, you know, some of the initial excavation, after trees are removed, we could probably definitely do.
Okay.
But waiting for a green light from the engineer on that, once we get water, wastewater, and stormwater stuff approved. And Reed Farm Lane, I think this is probably similar to the last month, but FEMA has been sent our updated grant request, so we've made a request to increase the amount of grant funds, moving the sale price, the valuation for the sale price from $750 to 1.2, which is the most recent appraisal that they got. So I've got confirmation from the state that, you know, it's basically in FEMA's hands to get approved. And we've also got some advance notice to start to have attorneys prepare kind of closing documentation, which is, you know, normal, but also kind of indicative that, you know, hopefully FEMA will, within a couple months, give us the affirmative on that. So I think the folks at the state are saying hopefully by the end of the year, we'd have a purchase and sale agreement to use the FEMA funds and state funds to purchase the property.
And that, the owners are, I know, not overjoyed, but.
So they'll have the option to take it or not. That's up to them. It's, you know, it's their right to take it or not. If they don't, we'll have to potentially have to talk about how, you know, having them basically sign an agreement that says that it's okay for us to de-obligate the funds, because FEMA's gonna want us to, you know, essentially restructure and cancel the grant agreement if they're not gonna take it. Which it's normal, it happens, you know. Typically, there's the funding in this round is actually better than it usually is. Usually it's 75 cents on the dollar, and the valuation is usually factoring in some kind of flood impacts, so usually the real estate's worth less. And so you're getting, oftentimes it's less than what the people can divest and move on from. So it's just not a great scenario. So this is not quite that, obviously that's complicated because it's a commercial property and there's different things at play, but we will, you know, take it to that point and see what happens. Also, there's kind of an addition here. It's not really old business, but it's new old business. That the neighbor at 78 Brookside has expressed some interest in pursuing a buyout as well. And the state is actually recommending that it potentially could get run through the state's funding that they have, so not FEMA, which has a different benchmarks for, you know, damage assessments, how much damage needs to have occurred. FEMA has a cost-benefit analysis that has to be gone through. The state's program does not. So, but at the end of the day, the town has to be the applicant. So I guess I'm asking whether or not it's okay to work with the neighbor to pursue that.
And so it'd be the same concept, they get bought out,
Yeah.
gets torn down,
Yeah.
we own the land.
Yep.
I think if we're gonna own some land there, might as well own a little bit more. Well, just,
Well,
And it's,
you know, we could make it into a
Well,
park or, you know,
it could be,
something.
it just,
I don't
yeah,
know,
no,
you know?
no, there could be some use as long as there's no new structures and no new fill.
Right.
Because it's floodplain, but you could do stuff, it could be green space, you could
Yeah,
have.
green space or a dog park, I don't know, just,
No, you could, a good example is like on Route 30 when you're going into Brattleboro.
Yep.
On the left, before you get to the interstate, there's some stuff down there. I think it was actually commercial, but, there were floodplain stuff down there, and now there's, I think, a couple softball fields.
right, right up
hockey.
by the bridge, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so it's kind of the same concept there. So,
But did they actually have flood damage, or did they have a?
it's where it gets more complicated for them. They've got to be able to, present, every day that they can't access, can be quantified. The driveway, the driveway had to be cleaned up or repaired, and then they've a couple of times had to have sediment like basically scraped off the grass, off the lawn, because it,
But structural wise, they have.
the house had water in Irene, but not, that was, it was partly flood water, but
Is this like the next house up?
behind the parking lot,
Yeah,
to the north, it kind of sits
Yeah.
back from the road.
okay.
But this also we're talking about taking things off tax rolls too.
Correct,
Right,
that's,
so-
yeah.
Before you know it, you'll have all of Butternut Glen and.
I know.
Then the flip side of that is the town gave permits to build in
Yep.
what is now a flood zone, or
Right.
maybe partially was then, or, the data wasn't that great
different.
back then, it was different times.
Different times.
And I suppose that's one less person who's
But as the,
complaining to have the town do things when the water rises.
yeah,
Right.
I mean, that's kind of that's why the state takes the view that they take, is that there's no other solution to,
It'll just be continuing.
their view is that the stuff shouldn't be there.
Mhm.
And that's why it's like, dredging the river and doing all this other stuff, none of that matters, because that's the river's space, and we've, invaded it, and.
Yeah.
and-
Are
and-
there any other properties that you think that, is this just gonna be like they got.
I think it gets,
Cause they get farther up than they would.
I don't know about
housing.
buyouts, but no, this will be a good test case, because the structure of the house actually doesn't get damaged. So when you start to quantify damages to justify a buyout, I don't know that it's gonna get to a number that's gonna be okay with the property owner to divest. I don't, if they're saying it's only driveway and yard debris that gets cleaned up, and it's
Right.
only quantified at X, the state's not gonna spend, $750,000 to counteract $5,000 a year in damages. It's
Right.
not,
Right.
it won't pass the sniff test, so.
Okay.
And that's kind of the case further up, with the next couple properties, that there's stuff, it's more of the land. And then if you go a little further north, there's some space in between, the pond and a couple of our bridges where there's probably, we kinda saw it in July, there's definitely a single family that's in that, the house isn't actually in the flood zone, but, it was in July. It was, I don't think they had water in the Sheldon house, I don't think they had water in the house, but it went all the way around it. So.
What's the nature of our costs to help, Aaron?
So my understanding is that we make an initial application, which would just be my time, and it's like a 4-page, application with the data that the homeowner provides. We do keep track of, like, within reason, how many days the water overtopped
Do
that
we
road.
need to have council involved at all, or?
No, not yet. So what'll happen is that application will go in with the early kind of damage assessments, and then the state will then review. And if they think that it's, a potentially fundable project, we would then get a grant for or the grant would include the appraisal. You know, if this was a FEMA application, it would include the cost benefit analysis done by like an engineer. So, I think potentially could include some of my time, but that's typically not huge, they're not huge numbers. So, I guess this would be a first step, and then if they pass you know, if they get a thumbs up from the state to work through the more complex parts of the process, which would be the appraisal, that the grant would fund that, so there wouldn't be any outlaying of money from us.
Well, I think, given the fact that the town has to be on the application, and has to prepare the application, I don't think we can say no. And we'll certainly see, I guess, how the state reacts to that, that could be,
It's a, yeah,
if the state says no,
No, I
it'll
mean,
certainly
it's-
discourage anyone else
It'll
from-
be useful information, we'll see where it
I
goes.
think you're right, yeah, and I think that in the property owner's perspective, you know, I think so the flooding is getting worse, right, and more frequent. And then we have a hydraulic study that we got a grant for, that basically says there's no real actual solution. So those two things make you
Yeah.
think, well, in 10 more years, is it gonna be, you know, is the house then gonna be subjected to
Right.
the damage?
Right.
And unfortunately, like from the FEMA perspective, that has to happen before you can,
Right.
you know, necessarily meet their benchmark in order to get the buyout. They don't do it preemptively, you know, we can make a strong case that the floodplain is probably gonna move as the river moves and the impacts will move north, but until it actually happens. And the state money is potentially kind of preemptive, but I don't know
It's probably because
where it'll end up. It's ARPA money.
I assume, yeah, that's what I was saying, it's not our tax dollars, it's federal money someplace, I assume, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's our tax dollars in federal sense.
Yeah.
Okay, no problem, so.
Okay, great. Broadband, everybody should be getting probably emails and text messages from Fidium Fiber to sign up at this
Yeah.
point, because they're pretty much
Yeah.
thrown up all through town.
Being on the CUD, yeah, it really has gone well as far as getting all out there. There are definite hiccups here and there, there's some
Yeah.
upset customers. I've been on it and it's worked great for me, and my neighbor across the street hooked up recently, and it's like, he's actually having a little more trouble getting it home. It started working and then it stopped working, I'm trying to get it going. But there's some hiccups, the problem is, it's like the guy who installed it, or put it into my house, he's from Massachusetts. The guy who installed it across the street at my neighbor's, he's from Las Vegas. The guy, so they're bringing people in from all over the place, and so there are gonna be some hiccups and some people complaining. I think it's, it's still.
It's a big
It's-
expansion, so it's,
Yeah.
it's a pretty natural thing when you're trying to.
And it's all of, it's essentially, it's before the end of the year, it's 99% of Bennington County is covered with
And
fiber.
most, kind of, urban isn't the word, but most village customers in Dorset are gonna have two options now,
Yeah.
whereas they didn't before.
Right.
But would-
Two
do you have a
comparable, I only have, I have had DSL and now I can get the fiber, but Comcast isn't up there. But interestingly enough, I assume Comcast will probably extend, that service area so that they can compete. So we go from, 3 or 4 years ago, it was $40,000 to run to Havoc,
Right.
like beyond Havoc Hill to Birchstone to the Orchard and all that. And now, I drive that a lot, so now you actually see Comcast trucks in that area north of their service area.
Yeah, but people have memories
Which
too.
means that, oh yeah, yeah. No, it's just good if both suppliers are there, then it
Yep.
creates
Yeah.
competition, which hopefully is gonna, hold down costs for customers.
On a different note from that, I just have a question for everybody. I've noticed lately when I've been driving through Manchester that
There's no cell
there's no
service.
cell service. What the heck, how is that possible? There already are towers, there has been
It's
cell
terrible.
service. How is it
Well,
that suddenly there's no cell
I've
service?
been hearing, you may know better, but I've been hearing that a big part of it is just the overload of the current infrastructure. That, that's why they were looking to put up more cell towers is, the existing cell towers can only handle so much volume. And that's increasing.
On old, like there's the radio tower over here, which has others, has modern towers next to it, and then there's the large one off the highway, and,
But that's why they're
Yeah,
trying
it's
to,
just
Manchester.
awful.
Yeah,
they're unfortunately keep trying to put them in places that everybody is gonna scream and yell.
well, they gotta go somewhere.
Right.
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, I was just curious about that, because I was driving through and like, I got cut off. I'm like, how is this possible? I mean, Manchester, I can get it in Dorset, I can't get it in
Yeah,
Manchester.
yeah, it's really the spine of, Green Peak that kind
Right.
of comes down, there's a little bit of a shadow area on either side of it, and that's, I think.
But it is shocking that we're getting broadband figured out before we get cell figured out.
And
Or it was
the
figured.
cell phone is getting worse. I mean, that's the part I can't,
Yeah.
Yeah.
quite grasp.
Last couple things in old business, Coolidge Lane is done.
Yay.
We are getting checks back from the happy, residents up there,
Well,
so that's good.
I mean, good job, Rob.
Yes.
Good job to the
hold it-
guys,
to-
they built a nice
Yeah,
road.
good on them, but also good on you trying to manage this whole thing. 'Cause
You cut the
that's,
deal.
Well, I mean, you guys did actually.
Yeah, but you were the one that has to deal with all the
Yeah, no, it
personalities
was,
and
I think that they're
emotions.
happy, I mean, I'm bluntly honest, there's 8 miles of illegal trail and it's all kind of in this nebulous, like, world that it lives in, and it can present different ways, so, I see it in some cases as a liability, so it's like,
Mm-hmm.
should we have it? Could we just get rid of it? But it's such a, case by case can be sensitive, so there's no real easy way to navigate through it, so I think it ended up, well, so. And we sent a note, we were a little bit under budget, so,
excellent.
not a ton, but like
Well, I noticed in your,
$1,200 or something
so
like that.
as you put it, they have the ability to pay it over time
Yep.
or whatever.
Yep, so they signed an MOU that broke it into 4 semi-annual payments, or they could pay it all in full, so, which I think most of them will pay in full, so, which means they're happy, so that's good. Let's see, we've continued to, we're successful in adding extra shifts, for evening and,
For speeding.
yeah, afternoon and evening,
Mm-hmm.
which is good, and we're gonna keep that on board, because we've
Yeah,
got some.
Dorset West Road's been really bad.
Yeah,
And there is the white Porsche with red stripe is back.
Yeah, we've got, well, it's up my road. There's-
Yep,
Yeah, somebody who really likes to open it up going up the road.
that's where he lives,
yep.
the top.
Yeah.
And
People
that's
with
it.
fast cars and they wanna show it off.
Yeah.
That's it for old business. So I have in the packet is the paving capital info, I don't have all the equipment yet, we're still kind of waiting on some pricing estimates for that. But this gives you kind of a primer for like what to potentially expect, or what we're looking at, with some, I guess, not a flow chart, but generally kind of some parameters about what might happen next summer, so. Dorset Village did not get done in this construction cycle, they didn't get far enough along with the water project. The hope is that will be rebid and then done sometime next summer, or, next fall. And that was Meadow Lane, Cheney Road, Kent Hill, and a portion of Dorset Hollow Road. The construction estimate on that is around $180,000. Morse Hill Road is now, we've been trying to separate Dorset West Road and Morse Hill Road in terms of when they're resurfaced, to push them out from each other, just because they're, it's collectively, it's almost 8 miles of road. And you end up with, almost over $1 million worth of paving kind of expiring in a similar time frame, which is difficult. So a couple years, the last two times they were paved on like back-to-back years, is what I'm getting at, and we're trying to separate that, so we're now, a couple years away from part of the West Road, or the last part of the West Road, so now it's logical to, think about a portion of Morse Hill, and basically predicated on getting the maximum, state funding grant. So if we get the $200,000 grant, we would then look to pave a portion of Morse Hill. And there is a match, so it would be, the total cost there would be $240, but $200 would come from the grant. And then the other piece is Paul's Way. I think I mentioned at the last meeting that we've been in communication with Long Trail School about paving the portion of Paul's Way from where we stopped to the Long Trail School driveway. And at this point, the thought is that they would, we've given them kind of a budget estimate, and that they're gonna try to potentially include that in their budget cycle for next year to be done as a project. So if I get confirmation of that kind of then opens up the discussion, and that's, I think, the larger part of tonight, is, do we then continue on from the Long Trail School driveway to the end of Upper Kirby Hollow, and then do we do the small section from the intersection with Long Trail and Kirby over to Peace Street? Because it would be logical to do that.
So
at
which
the
one
same
of
time.
these would they be funding?
The first one.
The first one?
Yeah. The other two would be, do you want to do them? That's the first question. Is it
Do the residents want
appropriate
that?
to do it? The couple that I talked to on Upper Kirby said yes. But I don't know if we should poll more, if we should. Do we care?
It's just-
it
it seems-
becomes a maintenance.
It always kind of surprised me a little that, there are a lot of people who come out and get upset when you're gonna pave
Right.
their road.
They wanna keep it.
And just, it's always nice to know that in advance, if there are gonna be people who are gonna be screaming that we're spending money on their road.
Okay.
So are these two different options, Rob? So in other words, are you saying from Long Trail School Drive to the end of Kirby?
Yeah, let's just say end of
or
Kirby.
Kirby just to Peace Street? Those are sort of two.
The two different options. You could do one or both, or none. But it's just
Peace Street is paved, isn't it?
Yep.
Just
Peace
up to
Peace
Kirby
Street and
Hollow.
then Kirby around. It stops just after Peace Street.
Mhm.
So the apron to Peace Street is paved, and then there's a section of dirt from just after Peace Street to like the tennis, really to the
Yeah.
to the school.
Mhm.
Maps it out.
Right, it's helpful.
And I guess, I know some people are against it just because they think it's gonna make people drive faster.
Yep. That is a common argument. And if we don't do it, then it's not, it's not a huge deal, but there's sections of dirt that's in between pavement, that's all.
Mhm.
And from a collective project standpoint, if you think you're gonna pave it in 2 years, because people then want it, you should think about doing it now and when it's all done, so it's all collectively done at the same time. So I think to Jim's point, I can send out letters to to people in both sections. And see
'Cause
what
I could-
feedback I can get.
Could kind of see doing it to
So just
Peace
looking at the
Street.
map, it looks like, Long Trail, Kirby up from Long Trail, that's actually a long ways.
It is, that's why it's the
Yeah.
93,500.
Yeah.
And that's that, cause it's brand new pavement, so there's the spec calls for 4 inches and, all that stuff, so it's more material. So once you get into like resurfacing, that's why Morse Hill is just it's a shim and an overlay. So it's half the amount of material,
Right.
that this would be, that's
Yeah,
why
just
it's-
imagining like if we had,
paving new stuff is expensive.
if one of these stretches, everybody wanted it, and the other one, people were iffy, then that might be an important piece of info.
Right, because I was thinking like from Peace Street up to Long Trail kind of makes sense, because Peace Street's
Yeah.
already paved. And then you'll have
With
that
a
section
loop of
paved.
pavement.
But then that section from Peace Street all the way to Lower Hollow, that area is much more, if you wanna call it farm-like or large parcels where
Right.
people might very well want to keep that
Dirt.
dirt,
Mhm.
just for the character and for also just to keep from.
Yeah, and when you have a long, sort of sparsely populated road, it's,
Mm-hmm,
you know, that just, yeah, I'm not sure. It seems we're an odd choice to,
yep. But I would definitely, reach
Okay.
out to some of the residents
Yeah,
and
there's
just
not-
find out, how many houses there
there's
are
not
between
that
Peace
many.
Street and
Pete,
Montreal, not that many,
3 or 4.
yeah.
4 or 5, well, 4 or 5, because there's a couple that go down driveways, but yeah, no, it's not that, I should be able to hopefully maybe get, a letter into their hands and probably get some feedback before the next meeting.
Yeah.
We got
I think that would be useful.
And then, so there's an accounting of kind of all the world of that stuff, to give you a sense of, you know, if you were to do it all, where you'd be kind of in comparison to what's needed to the budget, so. It would be a pretty big increase, but not, you know, not necessarily impossible, if you
Yeah,
get,
it's a
the-
pretty
if you,
big
if
increase.
you get the grant, yeah. So, that's kind of what we're looking at for paving.
but what do we, you know, we kind of look at it as, you know, you've got the whole big grid and schedule, and, you know, over the years, what, I mean.
The needed stuff?
24 budget was, you know, 185, but what, how much have we needed to add each year to kind of keep us in the ballpark of, keep our project list?
So that,
That's what
so the
I'm trying to figure, do
sinking,
we need, our sinking fund payments is.
yeah, so that's, traditionally, that was like 110 to 150 a year, 160 a year, something like that.
But-
The last couple of years, we've had to boost it up a little bit because, you know, the pavement costs are,
Yeah,
they're, I wanna say, you know, pre-COVID, it was, you know, probably gone up 30%, you know, 35.
that's what I'm just thinking, our whole budget, you know, maybe, if we had
So-
185, maybe it does need to be 200 plus, you know, a year.
Potentially, yeah, I mean, I think we're kind of we're slowly creeping to that direction, and we're pretty aggressive, we do a lot more locally funded paving than some other communities do, so. But the ones that are really up for like the schedule, you know, the actual schedule, it's obviously Dorset Village, and then Morse Hill Road are the two that
Right.
kind of would be recommended to be done. So.
And so, yeah, so just so I understand, so the reason why there's such a big increase, is it also because we've deferred like the Dorset Village, so
Yeah.
that's why
So-
it's kind of being bunched all together
Correct.
instead of,
Yeah,
and that was because we were doing the water project, okay.
yeah. Yeah, so all that kind of would be potentially shoehorned into one cycle
Mhm.
as opposed to two,
Spreading it out
yeah.
over a couple, okay.
And
But
it's
that's
just,
really important to do that.
Yep.
You know, when you finish up with the water.
yeah, no, it'll be, you know, it's logical to do it. In theory, it's gonna save some cost on the actual water project side, cause there's some synergies there, so. I can, see if I can get more info out of the residents related to Paul's Way and Kirby and then kind of report back.
Yeah,
But just looking at it, you know, if you ended up saying, let's say, you know, you did the Kirby to P Street, but not the, you know,
Mhm.
the other one, that all of a sudden you're in the ballpark of
Yeah.
normal
Yeah.
year.
mhm,
Yeah.
yeah,
So we have some flexibility to make some decisions there.
Yep, yeah, and if you didn't do, you know, Morse Hill, there would be flexibility as well.
Just I'm guessing, that, you know, we all ought to get used to seeing a couple $100,000 a year for going forward.
Yeah, at least in the, you know, fortunately, the state, you know, the paving grant for class 2 stuff, you know, you can access it typically once every 5 to 7 years. And they, you know, forever it was like 175,000, so it's a little bit more now at 200, but, it's, you know, when we get to the Dorset West roads and the, Morse Hill roads, we can't really, you know, we would completely have to change our numbers if that money wasn't available.
Right.
You know, we'd be even higher than the 200 number.
But it's also a good reason to, think twice when everybody wants their dirt road paved, because
Yep.
then it becomes a permanent part of the budget
Right.
versus maintenance, so it's
Yeah,
not
it's
just a
harder
matter
to-
of, will it
it's
look
a- it's
nice,
a
whatever else,
long-term
it's kind of like, you
decision.
know what?
Yeah.
It's actually gonna have an impact, there's some roads that we have to repave, and, yeah.
Yep.
So we give that a lot of thought. Okay. After that, Prentice Pond, the extremely long
Yeah, I'm not gonna belabor it too
proposal.
much, but,
But
so
I think we should go through the bios and.
if you recall,
Jason's a nice guy.
if you recall, I think it was in the spring, we had, state regulators,
Yeah.
essentially, like, do a visit, and they kind of wrote up a report relative to the dam. It's basically, it's a, 200-year-old plus or minus earthen dam. Water line runs through it, the road runs over the top of it.
Which has lasted a long time.
It really has, yeah, and it potentially could last longer, but we're now kind of under the,
They changed the classification.
I don't know if, yeah, they've changed the classification, which then kind of begets a review that's needed. I don't know that I'd say it's super required, but it pretty close to being required, that, if we were to not pursue it, they could come back in a couple of years and go, guys, you gotta do this at some point, you gotta get a sense of what's going on. and
Could you kind of boil
what
down,
some-
what is the change that caused them to, is it on the pond side, is it on the other side?
It's on the outlet side, so there's seeping water through the
The
earth on the
overflow
outlet side. So near the, like, there's a drop inlet that outlets water through a culvert pipe on the outlet side. I'll see if I can look at the pictures on,
The spillway
second-
outlet?
yeah, the spillway outlet to the right of that.
Channel that goes through there.
Yeah, the next page, on the picture on the
Yeah,
bottom.
cast iron water main blowout.
Seepage with orange staining to the left of the low pipe,
Yeah.
low level outlet pipe. So that is all part of the earthen part of the base of the dam. And the water, seeping out there is indicative of the, water getting through the dam structure.
That stonework still looks really awfully good.
Yeah, I
Oh, yeah,
know, isn't it?
it's it's very, it could make
It
us.
did good work back then.
Did not know that was there.
Yeah, I didn't know either.
Yeah, there was there was, like industrial, I mean, not super industrial, but industrial for 1810. Uses there. There was buildings on the pond and then buildings on the outlet structure.
Huh.
So it would have used the water
Mills.
to power stuff, yeah.
Yep.
Couple
So-
small mills.
On this side, is this the Caruso property or?
Crusoe would be
Ruggiero?
over to the
Okay.
left of that photo.
Because you
Ruggiero
can't
would
see
be to
that,
the right.
I mean, when you drive by, you can't see that at
No,
all.
Nope, nope,
Did
it's
that
actually,
clue
so,
was look like?
yeah, I mean, if you look in here, I believe that they had
Next
the,
time we go back. Look at that wall.
I don't know the dam is about 200 foot long at the base. So it's roughly it's roughly 200 feet.
Wow.
The kind of the base of the structure. So I guess the highlights here are, I have tried to acquire proposals from 4 firms, and this is the only one that I was able to actually get to return my calls
Bid, yeah.
and give us a proposal. And what's the principal that would be working on the project has a lot of chops, been doing it for a long time. And my general sense is that we're basically at the point where the state is recommending that we take this step to get at least a level of review done to understand what if anything is needed to be done. Obviously, it's in a state of failure, I think, is kind of the general thought, but I don't know if, what, when, and how soon,
How imminent
any
might
kind
be.
of, yeah, and I think that, and this would help solve that question.
But reading through here, they definitely made it sound like, we are going to be recommending you do something.
Something, yeah. Yeah, and I think it's, you know, and, Eric from Charles from MSK, he attempted to get the state to waive the test boring, or the soil boring part of it, just because, based on the argument that it's, you know, there's visible evidence that it's failing, you know, there's not, you don't need to sleuth too much further to get a sense of doing soil, testing to see if it's failing, cause it's failing.
Right, because you can see it.
But the state
State
didn't-
wouldn't bite.
wouldn't buy that.
That's-
So that is a required part of it, that is.
A good chunk of it.
It is a good chunk of
Like
it, yeah.
Yeah,
$10,000, yeah,
Geez.
yeah. Of the 53 and change, I think, of the whole.
And it
cost,
really
so.
does accomplish nothing.
sounds like good state for you.
Yeah.
Is this something that when we have the work done, would there be state funds that would help us to cover it?
There's a loan program,
Mhm.
so you could borrow funds and then pay it back over time. I'm not aware of a lot of, you know, it's the type of thing where, you know, maybe if we, you know, maybe a paving grant could pave the, you know, do the paving on it, and like, it wouldn't necessarily, there's no like dam program
Right.
funding that's set aside for rehabbing, that I'm aware of. I'll continue to do research on it and stuff. I don't really, you know, have a ton of experience with it. They being MSK didn't have, any recommendations about pots of money. The only thing that I'm aware of is the state's, you know, there is funding through A&R and DEC to take out dams. And they would do, you know, they potentially would fully fund that.
Yeah, that's not gonna happen.
But then, yeah, we get into the whole, we talked about this when we started the, you know, looking at this, was that you've got, it's 200 years old, it's the character of the area, it's just a whole, you know, it would dramatically change the, the area, and you would be left with a bridge, you know, essentially.
Yeah.
Right.
Instead of the dam structure, so you'd still have a liability, you'd still have a, you know, something that would have to get maintained over time. So, you know, we'll continue to see if there's funds out there. And I think that my biggest hope out of the study is that it'll give us a, you know, they'll come up with an estimated construction cost for whatever they recommend. And then it's a sense of like, you know, can it wait 10 years? Does it have to be done
Right.
tomorrow?
Right,
How bad is it?
Can it wait 20 years? I mean, what's the,
exactly.
you know, and then you have the discussion about, you know, how critical is it, and does it make, you know, depending on the funding number, like the total construction cost, does it make sense to kick the can down the road, or, you know, maybe, you know, bank some money for a few years and then do it sooner, so that, you know, and, you know, I don't know, your project that was X isn't, you know, 30% more in 5 years after
Right.
you did it, you know. So that's kind of where I see it going. I think what I'm looking for tonight is, you know, approval for the board to move forward with it, I guess.
I was just kind of wondering how, you know, hearing all that, and us in Vermont, they've got lots of examples and all the relevant experience, and almost none of it's in Vermont.
A lot in New Hampshire and Massachusetts. I think in defense of that, it's, he is just coming to
Yeah,
MSK,
it said he's only there for
Like
4
4
months or
months.
something.
and
Yeah.
his experiences in other states.
But I'm kind of
And
wondering
he's
whether,
he being, Charles is the primary
right,
driver,
do
for
people, I'm
MSK.
just wondering whether, you know, a lot of work gets done in Vermont on this stuff. Cause even then you look at, you know, the geotechnical and on
Yep.
dams, New York, Connecticut, Connecticut.
A lot of the dams in Vermont are, owned by utilities for the most part. So I don't know if that's indicative of,
That's interesting.
you know,
Cause about the only
utilities
one,
having staff that does the review and
we're
not
looking through everybody's,
consultants.
we've got, the Southern Vermont Orchard Dam, you know, we've got one, in Bennington. Millbrook dams.
But does that, I mean, that doesn't trouble me as long as they're working on
No,
dams, they've
right.
got the,
No,
they've got the
it's-
knowledge where the
same-
dams
no,
are.
right.
To me, the
Same
question
concept.
was why, you know, are people in our towns in Vermont getting away without doing
Pretty much,
dam
yeah.
projects?
Yeah. There's
Every place else they make them
avoidance
do it.
and deferred maintenance and
Not that that's a
allowed
good
by-
strategy, not that that's a good strategy.
No,
it's
allowed
just-
by, you know, the state hasn't been super aggressive in the way that they've regulated it. And that's kind of the reality of it.
Yeah.
So that,
At
from the
the
standpoint
state
of,
level. Now, there's
So-
certain dams that are large enough to have, you know, federal, you know, regulatory stuff, and those are the ones that typically are,
you know, the way down to Brattleboro, you have the big dam and stuff, but
but the smaller ones that don't produce power or don't fall into the federal, you know, the federal regulation, they fall under the state, and, you know, they don't always, this one's regulated, it has a permit, you know, they do inspections, but the state's been doing the same, you know, if you go back into one of the memos I had sent in the spring, was you could see the last, like, handful of inspection comments on it. It was just like over like basically 30 years. It was like, oh, it's not in great shape, not in great shape, not in great shape. And that's kind of the
Right.
level of a review. And I think that's not necessarily, you know, it's not, you're not getting a full view of like the real picture of what the liability might be. Because
well,
the
that's where
state's
I'm
really
trying to
not
figure, what
forcing
is,
you to.
if a problem happened with this dam, what would be the downside?
You know, damage to private property,
Okay.
not necessarily loss of life. I think, so the hazard class, it's going from low to significant. Significant is not, high risk is like loss of life and stuff like
I
that.
just, in the state of Vermont, I.
Significant sounds bad, but it's not,
Okay.
it also, there's an engineering benchmark, that has to be met with the significant piece.
Just trying to figure out
On the outflow
what
side.
normally happens to this stuff, because, you know, it's the old, so then, it's not a huge problem, but once we get the study done, then all of a sudden, they're gonna be like, wow, you guys really do need to do something here, and the state,
Right,
could be all over us to do it at that point.
and that, yeah, the
And
report is
otherwise-
53, the amount of work we're gonna have to do is gonna be a lot more than 53,000.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it probably makes sense to do it, it's just the old, you know, there's probably a lot, if we pretended there wasn't, then we
You
could probably get
could,
away with it for a long
Didn't
time.
the water was breaching over the road though a couple of times, right? Wasn't that what sort of?
So
That's
what
one of
has kind of, what has created this discussion is that the drop inlet is failing. And because it's a dam, anything that we do to repair or change or try to fix up that drop inlet has to be approved by the dam group and stream alteration and all that other stuff. And that's what prompted the conversation, with them was, well, you need to get this looked at, because we're not just gonna necessarily give you permission to just, you know, I don't know what the remedy would be, but do some.
That's where it's so
concrete work to
frustrating,
sleeve
that-
it.
Could potentially be some fixes that would give us a lot more life without it.
I know, well, I think
Yeah.
MSK is,
But they won't let us do that, they want to, and then do all those
Or
drilling,
soil
do all that drilling, even though it doesn't really, do you know,
You got
it's
$10,000
The
to
old-
spend on
yeah.
that
The
instead of
illogical-
fixing it.
things you get.
I think, I feel good about MSK's ability to try to steer in that direction. As much as, I don't think that they're
They've
gonna
done good
prescribe a remedy that's gonna be
They've done good work for us in the past.
out of scope for what the project is, I guess.
Mhm.
I think. And how, whether or not you wanna wait until, the state
And if we're gonna
has the gun
convince,
to our head that says, you
Right.
gotta do the study, or.
but if we're gonna convince them of a solution that, maybe is an adequate solution,
Yep.
that does fine, but maybe more reasonably cost.
This would be the avenue, you'd have
These are
to,
the guys
you have to do
And
this
you have
first.
to do this study first
Yeah.
even,
Yeah.
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 Okay.
Um, I couldn't find what this means, EAP? Could not find what that abbreviation is.
Emergency action plan,
Okay.
maybe?
There we go.
I don't, what page are you on, Frank?
It's page,
We don't have page numbers.
it's not page number.
Well, and it's on their bid as well, the task 6 is EAP, so
Yeah.
where they have the numbers broken down.
And I just didn't see where it said what, I mean.
Here, it says task 6, EAP 5500.
Yeah, I just don't know what that means, other than what they're describing.
Yeah, cause then you get into all this
Basic EAP data, whatever that
hundred
is.
pages of references.
I think emergency action plan makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know that it's right though.
It could be
Just
energy
curious.
No, part of the, part of the process they're gonna go through, which I think Charles was commenting that that the state's probably correct in the change of the classification. But part of the process that they'll go through is actually to kind of redo what the state did to say, is this a low level
Is it really significant
hazard or
not?
is it significant? Yeah, cause then there's the work that they have to accommodate, it's based on, I think, flows and flooding events and stuff like that. When you go from low to significant.
So do you need a motion
Move ahead.
If you're comfortable with it, yeah.
to,
And my recommendation would be to move ahead and get ahead of it a little bit. And I know it's not, and I think, in defense of whether or not the state's gonna come right out and say you gotta do this, I don't think they will. I think if it was, what started all this was the July storm and places like the Wrightsville Dam, outside of Barry, which was perilously close to overtopping and potentially putting 15 feet of water.
there's a little different scale.
Very different. So I think if anybody's gonna have fingers pointed at them, it's gonna be those guys first,
Not us.
not us. So I think that we have some, if there's shades of gray in terms of the remedy and how much it costs and what it looks like, I think that there's, by being a little proactive and saying, hey, look, Ben, we've got this, here's the options, this is what we're thinking, we can kind of move from there, and hopefully the review goes through and here's a timeline that MSK thinks is appropriate.
I'm happy to make a motion to approve moving forward on this, proposal as presented.
One second.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Yeah, and maybe just double check what EAP
I
stands
will.
for.
Yeah.
Cause it makes sense that that's what it would be, but it's also funny that they just don't define it anymore. And yet they have so many pages of information here.
They're talking
Just
about
needed a
getting
few more
going,
words.
getting going right away.
Yeah,
No, I'm pretty sure it's emergency action plan,
no,
because it's, the context in task 6
Right,
is,
it all
emergency
sounds-
notification chart,
Mm-hmm.
dam failure, flood inundation maps, EAP process, which is, having something that, the fire department would have access to, that's, that, where they're aware, or they train on it, or whatnot, and, yeah. But I can confirm that.
Okay. So finance.
Yep. What's on there? You can see delinquent taxes year over year, a little bit up, but pretty close to the same. 30% of the way through the year, 25% expended, which is good, kind of normal. Came in under budget with Coolidge Lane. We'll pay the fire districts probably next week, because I think I forgot to do it this week, so we'll do it next week. No real updates to the sinking fund balance stuff. I do have a footnote kind of related to when we get into the budget season that the state's requiring all employers to offer unemployment insurance. We're self-insured, So we're looking at purchasing it through VLCT, which the last time we looked at it was like $2,000 to $3,000 a year or something like that. It was not a huge number. We don't have a huge claims history or large liability. So we're gonna do that again for potentially this FY25 budget cycle. If we do that, that means we're insured through the league. We have a sinking fund for unemployment. It's got $50,000 in it. That potentially would open up that, that pot of money for discussion for, do you wanna reallocate? Do you wanna buy the budget down? What do you wanna do? It does, we would have to, I'm saying it now because if we go to, I think change, I think we have to have a vote, an article vote on it because it was created, I don't know the date, but it was created with an article to say this is the unemployment fund, blah, 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 can we put X dollars in it? So we would have to have an article warned to say, can we reclassify it, call it something else, change the purpose, can we liquidate it and use it for X,
Just
so.
Curious, cause I've, run into this before with unemployment insurance in Vermont and been shocked as all get out about the way it works is, cause typically you don't have unemployment insurance and then all of a sudden somebody who worked for you 10 years ago, you get connected back to them and all of a sudden the state's sending you bills. Is that the way it works with municipalities too?
Yeah, it's a quarter, it's like based on the quarters that they worked and where they worked.
Yeah.
Typically there's a.
But it's just totally out of the blue, you can get hit.
There's a reasonable half-life, but yeah, it can be a couple of years after somebody left, potentially.
And all of a sudden you're getting.
Cause they may have
just
left
paid
and not had a
$300.
qualifying departure from you, but they could have had a qualifying departure from somebody else, and then it goes back on the quarters
And
of
the
the.
VLCT insurance is gonna cover that?
Mhm.
Wow.
Yep.
That sounds
And
like,
based on your
for a couple $1,000 sounds like a pretty
It's like-
darn good
and it's
deal,
based on-
actually.
Money well spent.
It's based on your exposure, so we don't have a ton of exposure, that's based on, claims history and stuff like that, so.
Okay.
Okay.
So yeah, to me, it seems like it's a no-brainer to just go that route. And then there's the nuance of basically the state's saying that they're gonna require you to have it. And that my general understanding is the self-insured option doesn't work for the way the statute was written. Any employer with, even less than 4 employees has to have unemployment insurance. So, at a later date, the subset of that is, potentially, for instance, if you wanna know where to spend the money, the solar panels at the town garage, will be 7 years old next spring, and we have a
Wow.
purchase option on them, and I don't have the exact amount of that, but it's gonna be, tens of thousands, or, 10 to maybe 25,000, somewhere in there. To buy those out, and then we would benefit from the, all the production, and it would run against our meters, we could tie it to, to this meter, the meter at the Newtown office, to the fire departments, to the, and kind of be the full beneficiaries of it. Whereas right now, we're not, we do get a reduction, but it's only
What are we getting, 10%?
10%, yeah, so.
It'd be good to do just the little spreadsheet with
Yep.
we got 100% with the cash flow and against the,
Yeah, we don't have a ton of, I can do it, we don't have a ton of,
but that could be a really good investment,
yep, it could be. So, that's it for finance.
Okay.
One thing I was kind of, since we went through, I think you said you don't have the equipment yet, but were you planning on sort of, this has been really helpful, have sinking fund balances and all?
Yep.
I was thinking of the periodic view of the full capital plan, the paving and the.
Oh, yeah, I'm gonna, next meeting, we'll have
Great.
those 2 spreadsheets.
Great, thanks.
Yep. And that'll kind of set the precursor for, those couple of items for the budget, yeah. There shouldn't be anything super surprising in it, I don't think, so.
Okay. Can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
I'll go really quickly through the manager's report. Let's see. Coolidge Lane we talked about. We started got a grant to rebuild a retaining wall up the street. That started. It's going pretty well so far. On the fire district side, the water line project is roughly 40 to 50% complete. Generally, we're a bit behind schedule, but also under budget by quite a bit, which is good. And I had mentioned, I think previously, you know, at the September meeting, that it's going to create an opportunity for adding potentially some main line replacement under the same funding. We may even need the select board's help with that. The state just can't get out of their own way in terms of, like, you know, we have to, it's their funding, so, you know, we spend the money, we've got a line of credit, we then get reimbursed from them. You know, it takes, I mean, we're now working on 8 weeks to get a reimbursement back. It's not a huge deal, you know. It's, I don't think it's super abnormal, but
Money's not free anymore either.
yeah, it's 5%. I mean, it's, you know, and I think that's, you know, they still think it is free, but it's not. So I guess what I'm getting at is there may be a time where, you know, the Prudential Committee maybe even asks for the select board's help to just, you know, shoot off an email or talk to a legislator about, hey, we've got an opportunity here to, you know, to essentially get more work done for the same amount of money. You know,
So is the biggest problem the reimbursement, or is it?
No, the
also
biggest
getting
biggest
approvals?
problem is the state's gonna have to approve our adjustment to the project scope. And they're just typically not fast doing those things. And they have to approve it, and we also have to keep a vendor interested or go out to bid and then hit the next construction
I
season.
think getting the legislators often have a lot of pull with, you know, a lot of departments.
Yeah, we're not quite there yet, but just a heads up that if in January, I send out an email and say, hey, we need you guys to maybe send an email or give a call or something, it could be it could be super helpful. Cause it's kinda, it's one employee essentially, you know, can kinda slow stuff down, not on purpose, not for any bad reasons other than just, you know, too much work, I guess, and a slow process. But hopefully, you know, that won't be needed, and we'll be able to include that additional work in the same funding, which will be great, because it's really like stuff that,
Allowing the perfect to be the enemy of the good.
yeah, right. Yeah, no, they find ways to make things more difficult, like making you bore
Right.
Yeah,
soil that, you know, doesn't need to be
because
bored.
that's the way it's supposed to be done.
So, yeah.
Says
It's
here in
a-
this book.
Yeah, it's kind of a covering
And now I'm gonna get mad.
the butt thing. So what else? VLCT had their annual meeting a little while ago. Also, still on the passive board. Passive insurance is likely to go up a little bit, not a ton. There's worse things coming down the street. There's, you know, there a lot of flooding loss, but the passive's exposure was not super significant because there's coverage limits. You know, but it still might, you know, between some of the exposures and some of the, you know, investment losses and not doing great. Hopefully the rate increase isn't a trend, but it will be up a little bit for FY25. We talked about the bylaw map amendment. Planning continues for the Route 30 pathway. I think probably at the November meeting I'll have more information on that. At some point, Du Bois and King is gonna will be here to the select board to present their final study. We're still sleuthing through kind of a change that we made to some of the scope, and they're finalizing that. So, and they've also had some turnover with the staff. We met with NEMC, who's going to be doing the reappraisal project for the town, probably going to start in the spring. They did Manchester, they did Danby. seem to have done a really good job, very well-spoken, very capable of answering questions. I think when we get closer to them starting, we'll have them come to the select board and then, kind of have it pushed up to that level so people are aware of it. They seem like they know the area really well, and I think we'll do a pretty good job, so.
And what is their timeframe? I mean, have they been doing
It's
things?
supposed to be, so they'll start 24, they're supposed to be for the grand list in 2025, is what our contract says. I believe, I don't wanna misspeak, but Manchester has, what do you think, Sandy, 3,600 parcels, somewhere in there? 3,600 parcels, and I think that, he said that they ended up with 150 grievances to start, and then maybe a half a dozen will end up going to the state level, which is really, really good when you're talking about changing
That many?
3,600.
How many
large
actually went to
numbers,
the
so-
BCA, do you know?
Dozen, maybe. It was a manageable number. It wasn't like 50 or 70. Something that's just like.
Those were
Where the
big-
BCA goes
big
from-
adjustments too.
BCA goes from not meeting much
Those are
to
really big ones.
meeting a whole lot.
Yeah.
And they, that's what I think. My thought is when they come in the spring, that we can have them, present to the board and kind of explain, answer questions. What happened in Manchester? How did you do this? How did you do
Right.
that? So that we can
Anticipate.
be more informed. Yeah. So, let's see. FEMA reimbursement process continues. There's the total damage amount for the July storm wasn't huge. Footnote there about the beavers took revenge on our project, and got
Oh my
right back in the
gosh.
river and
Bastards.
literally have,
What is it
Got
about
rid of two
beavers?
today.
but the good news there is the pre-construction meeting for the rail bridge was last week.
Good.
Which means that it's coming. I mean, it's pre-construction, they got a vendor on board. They're supposed to start with some ancillary stuff this winter, I guess. I don't know if it's some of the prepping and construction of access road and whatnot, but it'll start next year. And that's a big project. And the other stuff we talked about. So that's all I have.
Okay, great.
APs right there.
Rob, do you know those precast blocks they're storing over in the yard?
Mm-hmm.
Are those railroad going, did they put in
Well, that's the retaining wall,
walls?
it's the retaining wall.
That's the
going
retaining wall,
up the
okay.
street, yeah.
Just curious.
Yeah, they, come from, it's Ready Rock is the company,
Yeah.
and they comes from Carroll Concrete in New Hampshire.
Speaking of beavers, what's happening with the beavers up there?
I don't have any updates, I haven't been over there in the last month, to check it out, waiting for the leaves to kinda drop before we go, and maybe some freezing temperatures.
Do we, the folks from the state, or are they coming through every once? in a
Tyler
while?
was supposed to follow up with, us potentially purchasing another culvert from RK Miles for him to install it, but he hasn't followed up. He had some rationale for the upper culvert. He was thinking it was still doing stuff, even though the water was basically over the top of it, like completely submerged. So, but I haven't seen it, and like I said, in a month.
Are there natural predators of beavers? Who eats a beaver?
Coyotes
Coyotes?
can, yeah. Bobcat.
Let's just release coyotes in town.
Yeah, I know. It'd be so much better.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
there
mean-
are coyotes in
I
town,
know, I've
so
seen
why don't we
them now
just
and then around.
point them
Yeah.
at the
Look at
beavers?
the beavers.
Fortunately, the wet summer kind of waned a little bit,
Sure.
and I think the water levels have subsided a little bit, which is helpful. Under other business, I just was kind of I didn't put it in here for discussion, but the status of wanting any information related to short-term rental ordinance. If you want me to collect information, or how you want me to
Yeah, I was
start to,
saying to Rob, it might be a good idea, just cause there've been a lot of articles coming out
Right.
and everybody's dealing
Everyone's
with this
doing
in
Right.
different ways. So, you know, before we even get there, let's kind of see what, just start putting a file together so we can see how other people are handling it.
Right.
Yep.
We don't need to reinvent the wheel, I'm sure.
So I've been
No,
kind
exactly.
of trying to copy some articles and stuff, but then it does kind of raise the, you know, different towns have had different aims, different goals with
Mhm.
it too, which is sort of interesting, but.
Well, who was it Shaftesbury or Sunderland or
Arlington.
something,
Yeah,
they
they
were
just
saying
said-
we're focusing on safety, and I'm like, okay,
Yeah, Arlington, I think it was Arlington.
is it Arlington?
Or maybe it was Arlington.
Oh.
yeah, it gets
So,
tricky.
yeah, it was-
You know, how much do you have capacity to regulate, what do you
But then you've got
regulate?
New York
Yeah.
City where
What
it's
do you wanna
essentially
regulate?
they're wiping out the
Yeah,
whole industry.
I like at a bare minimum the idea of having a registration at least, and saying, here's who's responsible. You know, I've
Right.
stayed at ones where you can't get in and it's 10 o'clock at night and you're trying to send an email to somebody.
Mm-hmm,
Like registration
Yeah.
good, but I also still like the idea of just, you know, somehow allowing people to do it, but putting a limit on how many
Mhm.
units you can do, sort of,
Mhm.
and that gets legally complicated because, you know, somebody could set up a new corporate entity for each location and,
mm-hmm,
but
Right.
you have to get at the ultimate common ownership.
yep.
Cause, you know, having the impact of just not having people have
Mhm.
20 locations.
Right.
And if-
But I think if nothing else, if you have a registration, one will know kind of how many buildings
Mhm.
we're talking about. And then also, who is it that's owning those and running those? Are they locals, or are they
Mhm.
people from other towns, or are they people from out of state? I think that would give us a lot of information that would
Yeah.
help to see what's the problem we're trying to address.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's where I think that, you know, to some extent, an issue like this that's, you know, a huge issue for everybody, if you're trying to, if there are some elements of control that are going to be accepted by people in town, if you're allowing people to do sensible things, but you're trying to, you know, you're giving some indication of we wanna control against certain other elements, and if you have an approach with that, then
Mhm.
just flagging that as a way to say, okay, not here, you know,
Right.
so it doesn't get started in the first place.
But I also heard someone who was saying that, you know, the most important part is trying to get the data and making sure that people register, and if they are
Right.
thinking that you're gonna start putting restrictions
They
on
might
them,
not
they're not
register.
gonna register.
Which
I mean,
then
nothing you can really do about
creates a
that.
loop.
Well,
Mm.
Yeah, and you can search for them and.
well, what do you know, that,
That's kind of the obvious, I mean, if we
Yeah.
get to that point where there's a, you know,
And say, hey.
creation of a list of who to send letters to or something like that, I mean, that's what you're gonna do, you're gonna go on
Mhm.
those and you're
Right.
gonna look
Right.
at, you're gonna look and see the properties and just kinda
Mhm.
do it there.
you'd probably, right, so you just essentially go to
It's about-
Airbnb, VRBO and stuff like
Right,
that
the
and
only
say,
restriction, you know,
what's
there's-
listed in Dorset?
The only other
That's
thing,
everything in Dorset, right,
Yeah.
and then you can,
the only other thing
Work
I
it
can think of
backwards.
is they are organized, you know, some of those owners do either fund or participate in the, I forget the name of the actual organization, but when we started to talk about the zoning stuff, there's a like a
Oh, yeah.
lobbying organization
Yeah.
that they fund that I'm sure would come talk to you, I'm sure it would be like, you know, they certainly don't, represent everybody in Dorset, but you know, they seemed like they.
It could be interesting
It was-
to hear
They
what
seemed like they were
say.
pretty centrist on certain parts of it, and and they may have some good. Hey, this town does this ordinance and it works fine. This one, you know,
Right.
doesn't work or whatnot.
Yeah, and they're gonna have their own biases,
Right.
but it's better to hear from those folks and
Yeah, and they
They
could
try to sort out.
potentially be a tool or a helper in
Mhm.
that process. Whatever, you know.
But that's why, cause it's just, I mean, you can, every month, you're.
You see it all the time.
It's all very current right now, so it's
Mhm,
kind of
mhm.
nice to have a sense and see how other people are doing it and what
Yeah,
are the
I think
issues that are.
that the reality of like, You know, if you were to put yourself in the shoes where you were, I've gotta go find a long-term rental in this area, you know, in the next month, like, and go through that exercise. And then I think that most people would then start to go, oh yeah, I mean, there's
There's nothing there.
Exactly, I mean, there's nothing there, which then creates the, well, why not? You know, where are they?
No, that's exactly
Or,
right.
you know, so I think that if you attack it from that angle, you know, then I think it's, you know, they can say, well, you know, it's these aren't available, or they on some level, there has to be some connection between, you know, maybe one or
But
two
that's what-
houses that were rented long-term that are no longer rented long-term, and
That's what truly
being
sort
available
of shocked
or
me
not,
was,
so.
I think, you know, because it's so much easier with the online and all, it's the old, back in the old days, people would do long-term because you couldn't be sure of
Who you're
getting
getting.
short-term rentals enough to
It was
make up
viable.
To make
for
it
it.
worth your
Yeah.
while.
But right now, with the short-term rental, you know, 1 month rental, the 1 week rental, you know, overnight rental being so high
Yeah.
versus a
Yeah.
And you know
long-term
you're gonna
rental,
fill it.
then it's like if I filled up, you know, over half of the time, I make more money.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know we've had huge issues at the field club trying to hire people, because we
We can't find anywhere.
And
we
that
can't
gets into the, you
find
know,
housing for them, and we,
and at the baseline, it's
we're,
one.
you know, we're talking to people, do you have a place over your garage, cause
Yeah.
there's just nothing
Mhm,
out there, and then
mhm.
you go to the agents and they're pointing you to Airbnb prices,
Yep.
which you
Right.
can't
You can't
afford
afford
if
it.
you're trying to
Yeah.
be there long term.
Which is, it's an, you know, you've got the dynamic of, you know, tourism and second homes has always kind of been around, and you've had appreciated real estate because of it, but now it seems like that Airbnb is doing that to the rentals. It's either
Yeah.
taking them completely off the market, or it's increasing what that baseline rent
Right.
is, you know,
Yeah.
you're starting to see numbers that are
Because
just,
Vermont rentals, you know, for regular
don't make any sense.
larger rentals even have been pretty high to begin with, you know, on a relative basis. Like pushed up by everything else, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My daughter trying to find a place up, you know, up by Hanover and all, and it's like the rentals were really kind of surprising. Since, you know, I've got kids in New York City and I'm like, you know, it's definitely cheaper, but not as cheaper as I would have
You would
expected.
think, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
30 years of underbuilding.
All right,
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And meanwhile, if you guys read something